The Rise and Fall of a Dictator, Adolf Hitler, a fictional narrative reflecting on the life and moral lessons of Hitler. Chapter 1, A Troubled Beginning. Adolf Hitler was born in Braunau am Inn, Austria, in 1889. His family, like many others in their region, faced economic difficulties, which created an atmosphere of tension in their household. His father, Alois, was a strict man who often clashed with young Adolf, while his mother, Clara, was deeply devoted and protective of him. As a child, Adolf showed a keen interest in art and spent hours sketching landscapes and architectural designs. However, his dream of becoming an artist was dismissed by his father, who insisted he pursue a career in civil service. These early disappointments left Adolf feeling resentful and misunderstood, planting seeds of rebellion. Adolf's school life was fraught with challenges. He struggled academically and often clashed with teachers, who described him as a defiant but charismatic student. Despite his failures, he harbored grand ambitions, envisioning himself as a leader destined for greatness. His peers, however, saw him as eccentric and often distant. The death of his father when Adolf was 13 marked a turning point. While he initially felt liberated from his father's control, the weight of responsibility soon fell heavily on his shoulders. His mother's later death left him despondent, and he moved to Vienna, where he faced rejection from the Academy of Fine Arts, deepening his sense of failure. Chapter 2, Early Struggles in Vienna. Adolf's years in Vienna were marked by hardship and disillusionment. Living in a men's hostel, he struggled to make ends meet, occasionally selling his artwork to survive. During this time, he began to develop his worldview, influenced by the rising tide of nationalism and anti-Semitism prevalent in Europe. He spent hours in libraries and public lectures, absorbing ideas about history, race, and politics. His fascination with the notion of a superior race began to shape his ideology. Unchecked, these ideas grew more radical, laying the foundation for his future political beliefs. The rejection and isolation Adolf experienced fueled a sense of bitterness and a growing belief that he was destined for something greater. He blamed societal elites and specific groups for his failures, a dangerous mindset that would later define his leadership. Despite the difficulties, Adolf's charisma and ability to articulate his thoughts began to attract a small following. Though still obscure and struggling, he saw himself as a visionary, determined to reshape his destiny and, eventually, that of the world. Chapter 3, The Birth of a Movement. World War I provided Adolf with a sense of purpose. Enlisting in the German army, he served on the Western Front, where he was injured twice and awarded the Iron Cross for bravery. The war reinforced his nationalist ideals and deepened his disdain for Germany's political and economic struggles. The Treaty of Versailles, which ended the war, further fueled Adolf's resentment. He viewed the treaty as a betrayal, blaming Germany's defeat on internal enemies and corrupt politicians. This narrative resonated with many Germans, who were struggling under the weight of post-war reparations and economic collapse. In Munich, Adolf joined the German Workers' Party, a small nationalist group. His speeches, fiery and emotional, quickly gained attention. Drawing on his experiences and frustrations, he connected with the anger and disillusionment of the German people, positioning himself as their voice. Adolf's rhetoric often included themes of unity and strength but was laced with messages of hatred and exclusion. His ability to captivate audiences made him a rising star in the political landscape, laying the groundwork for the Nazi Party's eventual rise to power. Chapter 4, The Road to Power. As Adolf's influence grew, he transformed the German Workers' Party into the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or the Nazi Party. He adopted the swastika as its emblem, a symbol he believed represented strength and purity. The party's platform promised to restore Germany's greatness, appealing to a nation desperate for hope. Adolf's oratory skills became his greatest weapon. He spoke of a Germany reborn, free from the chains of the Treaty of Versailles and the corruption of its leaders. He rallied against communism, democracy, and those he scapegoated for Germany's troubles, including Jewish communities. In 1923, Adolf led the failed beer hall putsch, an attempt to seize power in Bavaria. He was arrested and sentenced to prison, where he wrote Mein Kampf, My Struggle, outlining his ideology and plans for Germany. The book gained attention, solidifying his role as a leader of the far-right movement. By the time Adolf was released from prison, Germany's economic woes had worsened. The Great Depression created fertile ground for his message, and the Nazi Party gained the momentum, ultimately becoming the largest party in parliament. In 1933, Adolf was appointed Chancellor, marking the beginning of his dictatorship. Chapter 5: The Leader's Vision. As Chancellor, Adolf quickly consolidated power, silencing opposition and establishing a totalitarian regime. The Enabling Act of 1933 granted him sweeping authority, allowing him to implement his vision without parliamentary approval. His propaganda machine, led by Joseph Goebbels, ensured that dissenting voices were suppressed. Adolf's vision for Germany centered on creating a Third Reich that would last 1,000 years. He pursued aggressive economic policies, rearming the military and initiating massive infrastructure projects. While these efforts temporarily boosted the economy, they masked the regime's oppressive nature. The persecution of Jewish people and other minority groups escalated under Adolf's rule. Laws stripped them of their rights, and violence against them became state-sanctioned. Adolf's policies reflected his belief in racial purity, leading to one of history's darkest chapters, the Holocaust. Despite the atrocities, many Germans initially supported Adolf, swayed by his promises of prosperity and national pride. His ability to manipulate public opinion and stoke fear made him one of history's most dangerous leaders, a testament to the consequences of unchecked power. Chapter 6: War and Expansion. Adolf Hitler's ambitions soon extended beyond Germany's borders. He envisioned a vast empire, or Lebensraum, living space, for the German people. Under his leadership, Germany began to rearm in defiance of the Treaty of Versailles, while adopting an aggressive foreign policy that alarmed neighboring countries. In 1938, Adolf orchestrated the annexation of Austria in what was called the Anschluss. It was followed by the Munich Agreement, which allowed Germany to claim the Sudetenland region of Czechoslovakia. These moves were initially met with little resistance from European powers, who hoped appeasement would prevent war. However, Adolf's appetite for expansion was insatiable. In 1939, he signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact with the Soviet Union, a non-aggression treaty that secretly divided Eastern Europe between the two powers. Shortly after, Germany invaded Poland, triggering World War II as Britain and France declared war. The initial years of the war saw rapid German victories. Using blitzkrieg tactics, Adolf's forces conquered much of Europe, including France. His image as a military genius bolstered his support within Germany, but his decisions were increasingly driven by overconfidence and ideology, setting the stage for future failures. Chapter 7: The Turning Point. Adolf's invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941 marked a turning point in the war. The campaign, known as Operation Barbarossa, was the largest military invasion in history, but it stretched German forces thin and underestimated the Soviet Union's resilience. The brutal Russian winter and fierce Soviet resistance turned the tide against Germany. The Battle of Stalingrad became a symbol of Nazi failure, with German forces suffering devastating losses. Adolf's refusal to retreat, driven by pride and stubbornness, cost the lives of countless soldiers. At the same time, Adolf declared war on the United States after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, opening yet another front. The combined might of the Allied powers began to overwhelm German forces, both militarily and economically. As the war dragged on, Adolf became increasingly isolated and paranoid. He spent hours in his bunker, issuing unrealistic orders and ignoring the realities on the battlefield. His refusal to listen to his generals further weakened Germany's chances of victory. Despite mounting losses, Adolf continued to rally his followers with promises of victory. His speeches, once sources of inspiration, now rang hollow as the German people faced the harsh realities of war and the destruction of their homeland. Chapter 8: The Fall of a Dictator. By 1944, the tide of war had fully turned against Germany. The Allies launched the D-Day invasion, liberating Western Europe, while Soviet forces advanced from the east. Germany was caught in a vice, with its cities reduced to rubble by relentless bombing campaigns. Adolf's leadership deteriorated further as the war neared its end. He grew increasingly erratic, lashing out at subordinates and refusing to acknowledge defeat. Loyal followers, once captivated by his vision, began to abandon him as hope for victory evaporated. In April 1945, as Soviet forces closed in on Berlin, Adolf retreated to his underground bunker. There, he issued desperate commands to non-existent armies and clung to delusions of a last-minute turnaround. His dream of a 1,000-year Reich had crumbled within 12 years. Faced with inevitable defeat, Adolf took his own life alongside his wife, Eva Braun, in the bunker. His death marked the end of the Nazi regime, but the scars of his leadership of genocide, war, and suffering would haunt the world for generations. The world reacted with relief but also a deep reckoning. Adolf's rise and fall became a cautionary tale of the dangers of unchecked ambition, hatred, and the manipulation of power. Chapter 9: Reflection and Rebuilding. In the aftermath of Adolf's rule, the world grappled with the consequences of his actions. The Holocaust, which claimed the lives of 6 million Jews and millions of others, became a stark reminder of the depths of human cruelty. Survivors shared their stories, ensuring the world would never forget. Germany, divided into East and West by the Allied powers, faced the monumental task of rebuilding. The Nuremberg trials brought many of Adolf's closest associates to justice, holding them accountable for crimes against humanity. These trials established the precedent for prosecuting war crimes. The international community, determined to prevent another global conflict, created institutions like the United Nations to promote peace and cooperation. The horrors of World War II spurred movements for human rights and the recognition of equality, challenging the ideologies of hatred that Adolf had propagated. Adolf's legacy became a subject of intense study and debate. Historians, psychologists, and sociologists sought to understand how one man could lead a nation to such destruction. The moral lesson was clear: vigilance against tyranny and intolerance was essential to preserving democracy and human dignity. Chapter 10: A Moral Lesson for Humanity. Adolf Hitler's life serves as a grim reminder of the consequences of unchecked ambition, hatred, and propaganda. His rise to power was not solely the result of his charisma or ideology but also the collective failure of a society that allowed prejudice and fear to fester. Barack Obama's famous words: "So if there is anyone out there who still doubts that anything is possible in this world, let them see the power of a united people," echo as a counterpoint to Adolf's divisive leadership. Where Adolf sowed division, unity could bring healing and progress. The moral lesson of Adolf's story is the importance of tolerance, humility, and critical thinking. His manipulation of truth and use of propaganda highlight the need for vigilance in protecting freedoms and questioning authority. The failure to stand against oppression enables its spread. Adolf's fall also illustrates the self-destructive nature of hatred and unchecked power. His delusions of superiority and obsession with control ultimately led to his undoing, leaving a legacy of destruction that serves as a warning to future generations. The world's response to Adolf's actions are justice, remembrance, and education ensures that his story is not forgotten. By learning from the past, humanity can strive to build a future rooted in compassion, equality, and the understanding that true leadership uplifts rather than oppresses.